Good afternoon, everyone. In 1 second, we're going to start a video. I'm so glad to be back in North Carolina, where I can say yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and not be ashamed. I said New York to look at me like, what are you doing? But I am a proud member of being a member of the AARP, and when I turned 50, I not only got a card, because I don't know how you find us when we're 49, but a friend of mine sent me these 3 perks of getting an AARP card and turning 50, and he said the first is that, people will call you at 9 p.m. and ask, did I wake you? He said the other perk is that in a hostage situation, you're likely to be released first. And then the third, which I really remember quite well, the best thing about being over 50 is that your secrets are safe with your friends because they can't remember them either. So with that, I'm going to cue up a video to set the context of my conversation. It's about 3 minutes, and I'll come back to join you to share with you what we're doing in New York City and how you could also change your public space in your city. At the center of New York City and in the heart of every neighborhood, public parks are the cores of our communities. New York City's park system is now nearly 30,000 acres, with 1,000 playgrounds, 14 miles of beaches, and more than 2 million trees. As our system has grown over 5 centuries, our parks have always responded to and anticipated the unique urban challenges of the times. Since the first city park was established in 1733 at Bowling Green in Lower Manhattan, public space has been sewn into the city's fabric. Generations of New Yorkers have depended upon parks to play, relax, and connect. As New York City's population and industry exploded during the 19th century, visionary landscape architects Olmsted and Vaux designed parks like Central Park and Prospect Park, among others, to offer urbanized access to formal gardens and pastoral landscapes. Leaders of the newly consolidated New York City sought to relieve slum conditions with the creation of smaller community parks across the 5 boroughs. As part of this reform, the nation's first permanent playground opened on the Lower East Side at Seward Park. Hundreds more followed. Today, New York City's children have over 1,000 dedicated places to play. Robert Moses's bold and controversial vision expanded the Parks Department's scope, building new parks and playgrounds, recreation centers, pools, and other amenities that serve the people of New York to this day. Rapid social change and the fallout from suburbanization inspired both the Parks Department and grassroots activists to discover new ways to green their city, giving rise to today's community gardens. In the late 20th and early 21st century, NYC Parks has reclaimed derelict properties and redesigned them for public use. The High Line, Brooklyn Bridge, Hudson River, and Fresh Kills parks are former industrial lands now transformed and accessible to the public. New York City's population continues to grow and diversify, and our economy continues to transform, all as our coastal city faces the unprecedented challenge of a changing climate. Every era of park planning has responded to the social, cultural, and economic needs of our city. It is now up to us to answer a unique set of challenges for our public space that will cultivate equity and sustain healthy, vibrant neighborhoods. So I share that with you because I want to make the point that throughout the changing times, our parks and public space responded to the eras of our generation. We're now seeing changing households. We're now seeing an aging population. And the big question is, what is the future of parks and public space as we grow and we age gracefully as a generation? So I'll talk about the future of parks and public space, and I say that together because parks are not just these green islands. They're connected to public space. Is what we, basically in New York, it's our living rooms, our front yard, our backyard is where we connect, where we fall in love. And so it's very important that we make sure we provide the adequate space for our generation. I'm going to step away. We could turn this on now. Are we good? Not yet? Here we go. Okay. So I'm first going to start off by saying that I don't like to say we're just the Department of Parks and Rec. We're also the Department of Fun, Health, and Happiness. How many of your cities have a Department of Fun? That's what we are, and I tell my staff, I know we have homeless services and child protective services, but there's something about parks that we are the Department of Fun, Health, and Happiness, and that's our job. So I love when I saw this in one of our parks in Brooklyn. We love our park. That's a love note to we park workers. We want to make sure we share that love back because in New York, parks mean so much. It's where people go to form friendships, where they go, not just for physical health, but also for mental well-being. These are the places we go to escape, to feel alive. And so when I see that love note, it validates how important parks are in New York City. Now I have to share this quick story because as you heard, I was a planner, I am a planner, and I was president of the American Planning Association. And I remember when I took the job in New York City, all my friends were saying, planners, oh, you're a traitor, you're a sellout, how would you go from planning to parks? You know, it bothered me, especially when a newspaper headline said, ex-planner becomes parks commissioner. We had the conference in New York City the following year, and I know Jason Jordan's here, we have APA as a table out there. And I told my friends, you know something? I get hugs, literally get hugs when I open up a park. No one has ever given me a hug for creating a land use plan. So there. You want a hug? And you know this AARP, I saw your Livable Cities challenges. You're getting a lot of hugs. People will hug you for opening up a park. So the big question, now with all these changing demographics, is really what's next? And so that was my challenge when I decided to take the job. The mayor sold me on the idea that he wanted to build an equitable, safe, and clean park system, and I said I'm on board. So one of the things that we're pursuing in New York is equity. I'll talk about that briefly. 2, this whole notion of planning and placemaking to make a place was the other priority. And the other 2 I will not get into is resiliency and sustainability. We're a coastal city, things are changing. And then innovation and technology, we're just being smart about what we do. But we'll focus on 2 for today's discussion. So the first, I want to talk about what is different about parks in the 21st century. Number 1, these are not just green spaces. These are spaces for people, and we have to keep that in mind. Their experiences, their stories. When we meet with community groups, we know when they come there with pain or with suffering, they're carrying in their comments 30 years of pain and disinvestment that are coming out of their words, of being neglected for generations. These are spaces for people. They're not just green places with trees and grass. They're places for people. As I mentioned, it's not just for physical well-being, it's also for mental well-being. Study after study is showing just being in green space, what it does to your brain. In fact, they have more neuroscientists that are now putting sensors and watching people walk through urbanized and suburban areas, and they see the relief in their brain once they reach a green space. We know that. And we also know that we have to think of the economy, the environment, but also with people in mind. So they're serving multiple purposes today, and so that's something that's different in the 21st century. So when I took the job, the mayor said we got to come up with an equitable approach to funding our parks, and a senator in New York State said, I have an idea. Let's take money from the richest conservancies and just give it to the underserved parks. And I told the mayor that's not going to work. He says, okay, you have 6 months to come up with another idea. And we did. It was called A Framework for an Equitable Future. And we decided to do something very different. We weren't going to talk to anyone, weren't going to poll any elected officials or community members. We decided that we were going to take a very different approach to the problem. First,
New York City, big city, we were very blessed that over the past 20 years, New York City invested close to $6 billion in its parks. That's several mayors. And in fact, the evolution of New York City, the city you see today, was a result of the transformation of public space. That made our city livable. Brooklyn Bridge, Hudson River, Hunters Point South, changed the trajectory of our city because we invested in public space and we gave the best land to the public, and the developer's land was to the side. That was very important. And as you saw from the slide, we had industrial land by the waterfront people never got access to before, and now for the first time you can see, you can smell the water. There are views you've never experienced before. New York City's transformation was in the public space. So we invested $6 billion, acquired over 1,100 acres. And Mayor Bloomberg came up with this walk score that every New Yorker with trust for public land should live within a 10-minute walk to a park. In New York, 81.5% of us live within a 10-minute walk to the park. We want to get to 85% by 2030. The one city in the US that has a perfect score is San Francisco. But when I came on board, I said, that's great. We now have a walk to a park that's wonderful, but it's not just about proximity, it's about quality. And you'll see in a second what some of those parks look like, because even though it was with a 10-minute walk, I would not let my child or grandchild step foot in that public space. So we embraced the proximity, and we felt it was time to pursue equity. Now, when I say equity, I make it very simple. It's one word. It's fairness. Are we being fair about how we distribute our resources? Are we being fair about how we maintain our parks? That became the driving factor, was fairness, which means equity. And so we decided to do this analysis and find out how many of our parks, over 20 years, $6 billion spent, received less than $250,000 of investment during those 2 decades. And it turned out there were 215. 215 over 20 years. A child going from preschool to college, that park didn't change at all. In fact, it got worse. They had inferior play space. They were included in the walk score, but in fact, when you got there, is a place you didn't want to be, and you'll see a couple in a second. Could you imagine grandparents cannot take their child to their local park to engage and play with them and connect? So we knew it had to change. It was not fair that they were left off, and this was all data-driven. It told us that these parks were hiding in plain sight. So what did we decide to do? The mayor gave me $300 million to transform, not just fix up, transform entirely from the ground up 67 of those 215 parks. And I can tell you, close to 30 have already been completed, and there are some wonderful stories behind each one of those parks we opened. And so we did some target improvements, but these were complete transformations, and we called that Community Parks Initiative. So here's one of those parks. Isn't it nice, fun? Look at that nice gray carpet. Roll around on the asphalt. That was the Robert Moses era of playground. Now, that generation helped save kids from being hit by cars and horse carriages, but it didn't serve us today in this generation. This was in the walk score. This was included as your neighborhood park. My question is that a park or a parking lot? Now, this one's a little bit better because there's a bench and trees, so you can go there for a picnic, propose, have a good time. This was also in the walk score, so we knew something had to change. Now, I don't know if you have this in your city, but here's another barrier that wasn't fair. Now, if you're a child, 12, you had a perfect walk score of 81.5%, but if you're an adult, you would get a violation and a ticket. Imagine going in there and a police officer saying, ma'am, I know you have a cane, but you gotta walk another 10 blocks to a park that doesn't have that sign. Here's the good news, we changed this. We now moved this sign and removed it where it did not make any sense because we wanted everyone, regardless of their age, to have access to a park. My alternative was to have a concession out of each one of these parks so you could rent a child to go in the park and enjoy it. We didn't do that. So if you go to New York, all these signs have now been moved, and we move it closer to the play space, not the perimeter of the entire park. So we decided to take a whole new design approach to how we're going to change our parks in the 21st century. We have a lot more water features. In fact, we did a survey, and these water features, splay pads, whatever you want to call them, is #1 on everyone's list, from child to adult. You can cool off. We have over 700 of them. If you can't get a beach or a pool, they're in a nearby park. We make them attractive, so it adds excitement to the parks. Adult fitness equipment, oh my goodness. Dog runs and adult fitness equipment are the two most popular things people are asking for. We know people that are aging want to stay healthy. The kids play with it too. And so we always have these features in our parks. For us, vibrant colors. These are now community commons where people come together. Rather going from the gray asphalt is vibrant colors, beautiful. One side of the handball court has a mural. You'll see play equipment there and exercise equipment. The other side is the handball court. We did that one with Trust for Public Land. People are asking for green. Break up the asphalt. We want to see gardens. We want to see flowers. It just makes us feel good. It also serves a double purpose of capturing stormwater as well. So parks are doing multiple purposes, clean air, clean water, but also adding beauty. And because we have an aging population, we're now rethinking the intergenerational approach to our parks. We've noticed seniors like to sit at the edge of parks and observe what is going on. And so we make sure we have lots of seating and tables and benches for people to enjoy, families, and that all the paths are smooth. So for whether it's a wheelchair, a stroller, or a walker, we want to make sure it is accessible to all people. So here's an example of one of the parks. This is now in construction. You'll see some of the renderings. This is in the South Bronx, a very tough neighborhood in the city. It's right near one of our community colleges called Hostos Community College. Here's the entrance to the park, not so inviting, but it's on the walk score. What I like about this one is that the others kind of had asphalt. This one has vegetation. Look at nature. Seriously, that's one of our playgrounds and parks in New York. This was on the walk score. On paper, it was there. And this is what this neighborhood for 20 years had to endure. A lost opportunity for families and generations to connect. So we said, you know, got to change it. There's a community college nearby. This is a great place for people to gather of all ages. We made sure it was intergenerational, different places for people to sit. Also want to make sure there's a lot of access to make parks safe. You want to have people and activity flowing through and by. We did that, and it went from that sad-looking playground which you saw, and now this is what it's going to be. This is now under construction. You see the community college right across the street. Imagine the friends that'll be formed right there. The kids playing on a splash pad. Parents and grandparents being in an exciting space that did not even, it was there on paper, but it was not a space they could enjoy. Here's another one of our playgrounds in Astoria, Queens, the first one we opened. Look at the seating. I mean, look, you get to look at a handball wall. Isn't that exciting? I mean, I tell my staff, when you put benches and chairs, this is a living room. This is like putting your window and sofa looking at the garage. That's not what you want to do. I always want to ask this one, why are you sitting there, ma'am? What are you doing? So we transformed it into a colorful play space, and now this playground is rated by parents and grandparents the best place to go for your child or grandchild, and now the entire neighborhood. We rationalized the seating to make sure that this is now a place where people can sit and enjoy and watch what's going on, not by the handball, but by a nice garden overlooking the new play space. And we use color, color, color to make sure the kids have a fun and inviting experience. This is now rated the #1 in the neighborhood, where before people wouldn't even go in. This one's a bit of a sad story. This is another one that was near public housing. A lot of gambling going on. People drank these little bottles. I found out later on they were called nips. And my staff had to go in there and clean out this area every morning to make sure nothing was there for the kids to see. So again, while it was on paper, people did not have access to this park. But on opening day, 250 people showed up. And I'll never forget, this grandmother came up to me in Spanish and said, "Muchas gracias," because she said, "We can't travel to go anywhere. This is where we go for vacation all summer long." And that moved me, because I want you to look at that little girl's face. This was a hot July day. Look how many people were there, the largest crowd to open this up. The woman at the public housing was in tears because she said, "You didn't just give us a park, you gave us life, because this did not exist before." That child's life is about to change. Two more quick stories. One, and this is one that's always hard for me to get through. We opened up a park in Brooklyn. I don't have a slide of this one. And the little boy, about 8, asked one of my park workers, how much does it cost? We just renovated this park, synthetic turf, a track. You want to know how much it would cost to go into this new park? He did not think something that nice was for him. And he was with his father, and when I told him it was free, it was for him, he can go in, he lived a block and a half away. I know for him and his friends, their lives are going to change. And it hurt me to know that they thought the asphalt playground was what they had to have as their park. Another story, and I have a slide for this one. I always tell my staff, when we do a park, we always have public meetings, go a context bigger. There happened to be a nursing home across the street from this park. I looked to see if there was any outdoor space. There really wasn't any quality space. So I said, you know something? Do a nice sitting area within this park so when people come to visit their loved ones in nursing home, they have a place to sit. And they did that. This woman grabbed me and said, were you responsible? This was the day we were cutting the ribbon. Were you responsible for this? I said, yes, I am. She said, you just extended my life. My daughter comes to visit me. She sits in this garden, and my grandsons play basketball. There it is. Whoops, I gotta go back. That was it. Now, I told my staff, do a garden. I have some incredible landscape architects. Wow, they did a garden. That was for them. Knockout roses, lilacs, that's where her grandsons were playing basketball. She would not let go of my hand. She says, you don't know what you've done for us, because that nursing home did not have that space. This is literally across the street. In fact, you can see the corner of the building right there. So we were able to transform 65 acres of parkland, but what I really like is now 220,000 New Yorkers truly now were included in that walk score for real, not on paper, because it was not fair that they were neglected for 2 decades. That, to me, is equity. That was what we're trying to fix. By the way, I have more stories. I don't want to leave you crying, but I'm telling you, from people coming up to me, I lost weight and everything else. And so you know, let me share the story. I just ran the marathon for the first time on November 4th. I need to get an AARP proud in the back to show yes, because everybody knew, 58 years old, first marathon, but my goal, my hashtag was I Run the Parks. And I wanted to encourage people to get up, get out, get healthy, explore our parks, walk, run, just be active. And I noticed when we do that, that at my age, kids and cousins, and you're affecting more lives, not just me running, that they're so motivated that you're being healthy and active. So it's something I encourage you all to do, and I'm excited to run another one, but I'll do that next year. So next we introduce playing and placemaking to the agency in parks. And when I say this, we'll talk about experience and memory, authenticity, but I don't just want to create a park or a public space. We're making a place, not just a green space with trees and grass, it's a place. And to me, that's about experiences, that's about memories, it's much, much more. But for us, anytime we do a project, we engage the public, and we engage the public, it is a relationship. We listen, we observe. It's not just public speaking, it's not just doing a presentation. We have to be engagers and not just speakers. We have to listen and spend time with people to understand what is going on. I go to public meetings early and speak to the crowd, and these kids were telling me, I said, what's your favorite part of the park? They said the rock slide. What is a rock slide? It was this giant rock that people slid down. And then when I was at the public meeting, I said the rock slide, even the parents said, oh, I know the rock slide. Engage, spend time. Make sure the participants in the room reflect the diversity in the community. I'm not just playing for who shows up. We want to make sure generations, race, ethnicity, they're reflected in the room so we can engage them about their needs. We want to be in agreement about what problem we're solving. I don't like doing wish list planning. What would you like? This? Sure. If there are challenges and problems, let's talk about it. Be clear in the scope of work and manage expectations about what you can do and what you can't do, because very often when we plan, people have been promised to death and those promises have been broken. So you need to be honest and sincere when you engage the public. And when I talk about diversity, it's not just black, white. It's age, race, culture, generation, household type, family. The predominant household by 2030 will be one person. Not a family, one person. The majority of households in the United States is now a single mother. So we have to understand we plan, things are changing. And we have to plan for that diversity as we change and grow as a city. When we look at generations, there are 6 generations living at any given time. All of you in this room are on this list. If you're not, you're dead, so I know you're on this list. And so when we have our public meetings and we look at these generations, each one of them have different values, needs, and aspirations for public space, for parks, and for neighborhoods. And so we don't just plan for who's in the room. We have to be sensitive. Older generations are looking for certain things, younger generations are looking for certain things. We have to navigate and balance the needs of both and not have one group dominate the other. And so in New York City, the majority of our households are basically 53 and under. So we have to make sure that we have that balance as we have our public meetings, because now we're finding that younger generations always don't do public meetings. We have to go out to them. We have outreach coordinators, so we hear all the voices so that everyone is included. Very important. If I had to summarize, older generations were consumers of goods. We love to acquire, buy stuff. But the younger generations are consumers of experiences. A young person will move to a city without a job. Why? Because they love the experience of that place. It is changing the way we plan for cities. You probably all know that. And so I tell my staff, I don't just want to be designers and planners, but experience builders, people looking for an experience of place. And when you travel, you pick that place because of the experience you think you're going to get. We want to do the same thing for parks. I have a saying that people may eat and sleep in their homes or apartments, but people live in a public space. That's where they go to get healthy. That's where they go to connect. That's where they go to socialize with their friends. All the action happens in a public space. It's our job, if you want to have a livable city, accessible, walkable, and lots and lots and lots of public space. New York City gets over 130 million visits a year to our parks. Our parks. That's more than the entire state of Florida, including Disney. To our parks. It shows you importance of public space to people, where they meet one another. And I think it's one of the solutions to some of the issues we're having, because all the diversity come together. Olmsted designed parks as democratic spaces where it's free and everyone can come regardless of their race, their age, their income. They're for you. We talk about experience. Here are people sitting, looking at cars go by. Who does that? Those people is the experience on a High Line. That's a highway. They're watching cars go by. This is cool. It's the experience of place. I'll skip this one for a second. And here's another one. This is underperforming asphalt. This is a street in New York City where Broadway and Fifth Avenue come together. These were traffic islands. Jeanette City Con decided this was useless asphalt and converted into this incredible public space right there at the Flatiron Building on 23rd Street and Fifth Avenue. They're there because of the experience, and now land we own, this underperforming asphalt now has become this incredible place where people can sit and dine and enjoy the views of New York City. So that brings me to my next concept about the public realm. What is the public realm? Streets, sidewalks, bike lanes, public spaces. Unfortunately, all these are viewed separately, even though they're one system. Parks in New York City represents 14% of New York City. Streets and sidewalks, 26%. You add those together, 40% of New York City is in the public realm. But we don't act like that, and we don't treat it that way. We divide it up between different agencies, from transportation to parks, etc. But the average citizen that's walking on a street doesn't know if it's parks property or managed by the Department of Transportation, and guess what? They don't care, but the agencies do. So we saw this incredible opportunity of getting agencies to come together to form a public realm team, because this is an asset we own. We just managed it poorly, gave too much to cars, not enough to pedestrians, and now we want to reclaim it because we don't have to acquire anything. We own it, we just reprogram it differently to give it back to the public, and you'll see some examples about how we're doing just that. Someone famous once said that the sidewalk adjacent to the park is considered the outer park, and that person is the father of landscape architecture, Frederick Law Olmsted. When he designed Central Park and Prospect Park, if you ever go there and visit, there's an alley of trees and benches. He didn't even want a wall on Central Park. That was the commission of Central Park that forced that in. And then when I came to my job in New York, I looked at the city charter. What did it say? Parks is to manage and care for all parks, squares, and public spaces, and the sidewalks adjoining the same. Yes! So I called the DOT commissioner. I said, we have to talk. And she said, you're right. So I told my staff from now on that it's not a sidewalk, that is an outer park. And it changed our whole design approach. You see a sidewalk, I see a park. That fence right there, that poor little dog just wants to sniff some grass, but no, he can't. Got to walk another 10 minutes to get into the park. We are fence and gate happy in New York, but we're now going to look to put a bioswale, and that is now a park. That is the outer park, and not what you see right there. The trees will do better, water quality, and we're now going to cut some holes in that fence so people can get in. This one always made me laugh. I had a feeling we thought the trees were going to run away at night, so we put a fence around it. What are they protecting? I don't get it. It's just, and you've got to crawl like this to get in there. And walk loops around. So when people say, wait a minute. Fences keep us safe. Do they really? Can anybody tell me what's happening halfway down that block? If something's happening to someone right now, can you see it? No, fences don't make us safe. In fact, right now, parks are so safe in New York City, less than 1% of all crimes happen in parks, and we want to make sure they're safe so people can enjoy our parks throughout the city, and we're doing a number of things. For one, we're looking at these fences and removing these barriers. This is Shakespeare Liberty Walk in Central Park. You can see it, you can touch it, you can take selfies, whatever you want to do. That's in Manhattan. But if you go to Queens, we do this to our statues and monuments. Could you imagine? Grandma, who is that? I can't see, I don't know, This mentality is somehow fences and gates make us safe, and so, because I'm commissioner, it's coming down. In fact, I think it's down now. This was last week. We have to remove these barriers so that people can enjoy. We have this new initiative called Cool Pools. This is a place where kids go for summer camp and swim and have lunch, but it doesn't look like this. It looks like this. What message am I saying to children? We have to imprison them just to have lunch. Because if we don't respect them as our park goers, will they respect us back? In fact, when we improve a park, we're seeing the fact that it's not being vandalized. We're investing millions of dollars. And because we respect them by giving them the best of quality park, they in turn respect us in return. So we're changing this. We already cut the fence down. This is what it looks like. We have a new Cool Pools initiative. You want to go online, check it out. It is really cool. Attendance in our parks brought dignity to our municipal pools. Attendance went up 50%. People are so happy. So we want to do what they do in Greensboro, where you don't know where the sidewalk ends or where the park begins. It's all seamless public realm. Rethink all of it. And we're doing this also in New York City. This is in the Village, Father Demo Square. They have a more seamless, open, transparent, lower fences, better lighting. You feel safe in the park because you can now see what's going on by removing all those barriers and those gates and those fences. So that gave birth to the Parks Without Borders initiative. The mayor gave me $50 million as a pilot project to see how it would work. So what the program is about is to look at the edges, the entrances, and adjacent park spaces, that wasted land at the corner, to recapture them because we own it. It already is ours. We just have to capture it back into the park. In terms of entrances, we are removing fences and taking them down so now people have direct access into the park, safer, easier, enjoyable for all generations to access the park. We're either taking down the fence or lowering it, and because the sidewalk is the outer park, we're putting more benches there so people can sit. Because we found out that parks close, but guess what? Sidewalks never close. So you can still enjoy green space, sit there. If you have some groceries, you want to take a break, you can. Changing how we're playing for our parks. And then these weird little spaces, we just did one recently. We're taking it down. The community now can see the grass rather than having it caged behind a tall fence. We had to get people nominate the park for this pilot that they want us to use this treatment. We thought we would get 1,000 nominations. It's New York. We got 6,000 nominations. Do this. Of all ages. But we can only do 8. So we picked 8. I'm going to share with you just 2 of those. Seward Park, which in the video was the first playground in the United States, and Prospect Park, which is my favorite park where I grew up. So Seward Park, as I said, first playground. Beautiful library in the background, beautiful garden. The garden, up until I intervened, only 3 people had a key. You couldn't even enjoy it, but it was a public garden. And the library, for some reason, there's a gate there. You can't even get to it. You have to walk around the block to get into the park to go to the library. It made absolutely no sense. So this is one of the projects we wanted to intervene to do our Parks Without Borders initiative. First thing is we want to lower the fence to 4 feet. You can see the beautiful garden, feels safer, more accessible. This is now the plan in the yellow area, the library. You can see where the fence is to the bottom, and then that's the park that we're going to open up. To make it a lot more clear, I'm now standing on the library steps, and you can see the gate to my left, and there's no benches. This is a plaza. This is supposed to be a cool space. It's going to go from this to this. No more gate. Seating. It's a library. You want to go outside, sit, read a book, spend time with a friend, open up the garden, take down the fence. We own this. We just had to reprogram it to give it back to the people. Public space for people, not just a green space. How this is going to help so many people of all ages age gracefully in our city. I grew up in Prospect Park, this horrible edge, 3/4 of a mile. The lesser affluent side of Prospect Park could not get into this park. Was not right, was not fair. We're going to put a new opening, and that's what it's going to look like. First time, you don't have to walk 20 minutes to get into this park. You now have access to this incredible green space, one of New York's best parks. My last example is Travers Park. This is an example of a partnership where we took a park, a street, and merged it together to create this incredible new park. So there's Travers Park. We took the street and demapped it. We took a school field that we purchased, and together we created this new, dynamic, incredible new park. This one's halfway through construction right now. So once again, there we have this tall fence, a dog with no grass, poor dog, asphalt playground. It's going to go from this to this. Fence gone. Chain and pole. The tree wells. We make those gardens as well. So we bring the entire park experience out to the park because the sidewalk is the outer park. Another example. Lots of seating for people to connect and enjoy. By the way, that park closes. All those benches stay open all night long. We could talk about homeless in another Q&A because we have to coexist with them. We don't worry about that. Here's the street from Department of Transportation that now is going to be a public place, and there it is. Connecting the park together, a plaza space for special events. Again, all city-owned. We just programmed it very differently. And here's another example of the plaza as it meets the park. Now this is one that doesn't, these play units were so far apart, a child would go from one to the other and run and go, Mom, wait, I'm tired, hold up. This was the only flat part in this park. This is Highbridge Park, all sloped. You have views of the Bronx. And we said, you know, this has to be dignified for people of all ages. Never understood what that red thing is. Sometimes my staff goes and travels to other countries and come back and says, I have a cool idea. You're not traveling anymore because I don't know what that red thing is. But it's going from this to that. Again, another place that hadn't seen investment in decades. The community is so excited about this one, of all ages. And there's something in here for all ages because we want to be multi-generational. So as I close, our goal is to create a more equitable park system with a seamless public realm for present and future generations because we believe in equity, we believe in placemaking, and we believe that green space and public space are for people to thrive, to grow, to be physically healthy and mentally healthy as well. Thank you all very much.
Thank you for that. You know, one of the things I love is that there were just a ton of practical things to do, right? Not just the philosophy, though you gave us some great principles, but also just those really pragmatic tools and tips. Especially as we think about community engagement. We've heard a lot here over the past couple of days about the importance of community engagement. And you did share some principles. Clearly you're using technology to help get community engagement. Can you talk about some of the other techniques that you've used to involve the community and other stakeholders?
Well, the first thing, we're blessed in New York City where we have a whole team of outreach coordinators. And so I actually gave all the presenters public engagement one-on-one class to make sure they understood what I meant about public engagement. Number one, we do a profile of the demographics in the neighborhood to find out we want a full representation at the meeting. If not, we have to do additional outreach. Having children, particularly for play spaces, are key. We'll go to local schools, the daycare centers, and we have a special table where the kids actually tell us what they want to see. Yes, they want crazy things, while the most incredible tree house we've ever seen, and but what's important is that we engage them, that they have a stake in it. We also make sure that we listen. We take our time to listen to the stories, because you will hear a lot of people with a lot of pain about, yeah, people have been here before promising us to do things. We want to make sure we go to a community, we have a budget and real capital dollars to make a difference. Otherwise, we're concerned that we don't want to have more broken promises. But we listen very carefully, and we design responsibly to address their needs. But when I say engagement, it's listening, it's observing, and it's getting to know the culture about what matters.
So what are some of the other stakeholders that are really important to include in this process besides the community and the citizens?
Well, for one, our staff, because we want to have maintenance staff. Anytime we do a project, we want to make sure it's maintainable. We also want to have some of the faith-based institutions. We look for all the institutions nearby. As the case I mentioned, it was a nursing home, so we want to make sure that they were engaged. So we look to see who is within the neighborhood that shares an experience with this public space to make sure they're included. So we just want to make sure all the ages are represented. We want to make sure ethnicities, because some people are afraid to go to public meetings, and so we have to do additional outreach to hear their concerns. And so that basically is how we do our outreach, and it's been very effective.
Anything that you've tried that didn't work in terms of community engagement?
I'd have to, well, I was concerned early on, because I tell my staff, I make them do the homework, the venue has to be right. You can't have a PowerPoint that's too small. My staff were like, anytime in a presentation, I say, I know you can't see the slide. If you do that, you've already failed. Acoustics, microphone. I use a lot of pictures, because if people speak another language, pictures are very effective. Don't use jargon, because a lot of us could be jargonistic and be what they call acronymocrats. So we try to speak in plain language, but probably what hasn't, and we provide food at our public meetings. But I think what doesn't work is not being prepared, not checking the venue in advance, not checking the acoustics, and having poor quality AV equipment that can really disrupt the meeting and frustrate a lot of people. Like, I remember I was in a room of 200 people, and the slide was something you had at home when you showed home movies, and I told my staff, are you kidding me? And everybody kept saying, I can't see the slides. The whole meeting had no purpose, because you could not communicate what feedback you wanted to get.
Yeah, so you've got to be really thoughtful going into those.
Exactly.
So I've got a couple of questions here that I think are related. Again, you've got a lot of really sort of sensible and practical ideas, but change always brings some resistance. And especially, we hear a lot about gentrification. So can you talk a little bit about how you've dealt with that resistance, especially those questions of gentrification?
We hear very often, if you improve our park, it'll lead to a gentrification. That is very, very rare unless you're in a very high-profile, high-market area. The High Line, it was a meatpacking district. We renovated a railroad line. The real estate values went up. It rarely happens in neighborhood parks. What I tell people that say, if you improve this park, it'll lead to gentrification, I said, what you're telling me is you want that park for another 20 years to stay the way it is. That is not acceptable, and it's not going to happen. I will not deny a generation of children not to have a quality space because a few people are fearing gentrification. It's just not going to happen. The City of New York has other programs to deal with gentrification, building affordable housing. We have anti-tenant harassment legislation. But to deny families, kids, seniors a decent, quality, safe public space is an absolute, and I will not take no for an answer.
Again, a couple of sort of related questions. A lot of our attendees here are from smaller towns, not New York City. They don't have a $300 million budget, and I got to be honest, I don't have a $300 million budget. So what advice would you give them as they're thinking about their parks, their public spaces?
For one, because I get this question often, I go back to the Department of Fun, Health, and Happiness. There's incredible things you can do through volunteers, through park staff, to bring life and excitement to your public spaces that cost little to no dollars. We have a lot of companies and organizations that are willing to fund smaller projects to do programming to our parks. We have volunteers that adopt our parks, then clean it up. That in itself becomes this whole community gathering experience where people go in, spruce it up, connect as a community. We have over 600 friends groups and 60,000 volunteers that come into our parks to help spruce it up. So there are low-cost things you can do, but if you have fun in mind, you can do these things, and you'd be surprised how a lot of companies will support it because they now see it as a one-time event, help spruce up the park, invest some dollars. So start small, but just remember that people are looking for some of those spaces where they could get out, get healthy, and have fun.
Okay, now I get to ask a sort of fun question. So you shared a lot of pictures of great parks. I'm a big fan of New York and New York parks because for some reason my kids didn't want to go to the museums, they just wanted to go hang out in the parks when we'd go to visit. So what is a hidden gem of a park in New York City?
One is Astoria Park. That one is in Queens. It is stunning views, a fun park, nice slopes, great views. So I say one is definitely Astoria Park. That would be a hidden gem. There's another one on Northern Manhattan, not High Bridge, but it's Inwood, Fort Tryon Park. The cloisters are there. It's a romantic setting. When you go there, if you're not married, you're going to want to drop on your knee and propose to somebody. That's where I was supposed to propose to my wife, but I took her there for a date. She wasn't ready yet. But Fort Tryon, in fact, where I showed you the picture of Frederick Olmsted, that was through Heather Gardens, which is what you have to pass through to go through the cloisters. It's very romantic. And Dr. Ruth, you know Dr. Ruth, remember her? Dr. Ruth Westheimer? She lives nearby. She's a good friend. Her husband, she has a park bench for him. If you go there, I'm just going to say what she said. She tells everybody, you must give to parks. You give to parks, you will have good sex. That's what she just... People start giving at, she's on the board of Fort Tryon, so Dr. Ruth is a good friend. So hidden gem.
All right. So going back to that whole change can be hard for a community and for anyone that's working on it. What are some of the best arguments you would use and you could offer to neighbors who are afraid of losing that parking lot to transform it into a park?
Wow. Well, they can park anywhere else. Parks are public gathering places. Parking lots are car storage. Memories are going to be created in that public space. I don't know how many memories are going to be created by having a car parked there overnight. This is about giving life and memories. We, in the Parks Without Borders Summit, we ask people to share their favorite memories in parks, and it would bring tears to your eyes. When my father taught me how to play baseball, before my father passed away, we had a conversation over there. Family reunions, weddings, social gatherings. Parking lots don't offer that. And so when we look at what parks do for us and connect us, to me, there's a certain value. Secondly, I tell people, yes, parks are expensive, but don't always look at the cost. Look at the value of what that public space is going to give you for future generations as well as today. And so for me, when I look at a parking lot versus a park, I look at the value of what that's going to do for physical health, for mental health, for memories, for bonding. My brother passed away 10 years ago, and we ran together in Prospect Park. I love that park because I feel connected with his spirit just running through that space. It was in Prospect Park. That's where I feel closer to him than any other place. And so for many of us, public space and parks mean that. I can't translate that value to where you store cars overnight. It's just not the same.
Yeah, so let's stick with that topic of value and investment. And how do you think about and approach the investment in revitalizing parks and public spaces versus the maintenance costs? And how do you plan for that?
Well, we're changing. The technology part I was sharing with you is that we're using a lot more analytics about how we care for our public spaces. We now have fixed crews that float from park to park, but now we have specialists that take care of synthetic turf and our gardens. So we're using a lot more analytics to figure out what is the optimized crew. We're also planting new material that we know is a lower maintenance and it has better resiliency over time. So we do spend a lot of time on the design side. What can we maintain? Luckily for us, when we get more parks, we get more staff, so that does help. But we're always looking about how it could be better, smarter. We have new trash management techniques, putting trash cans in a place where people will likely throw their garbage. There's a whole science behind this. So we're just using a lot more analytics to improve our operations, but also planting material that is more resilient, doesn't require as much maintenance, so they can still be green, beautiful, and people can enjoy them.
Yeah, and we spent some time at lunch talking about the role of some of those specialists like landscape architects
Right.
who help make some of those choices. All right, another one that I know comes up is the intersection between safety and policing and park spaces. And I know you talked a lot about what we might think of as safe is not always safe, not
Right.
necessarily what's creating the safety.
So there's something called crime prevention through environmental design, and our police department has experts on how do you make a park safer. As I said earlier, our parks are very safe. Less than 1% of all crime occur in our parks. So we look very carefully at where criminals like to be, and they like to have high fences and barriers and places where they can hide. And so we eliminate all those places, improving sight lines, lowering fences, lifting up canopies so you don't have these low-hanging branches, and lighting. But we also activate our parks with a lot of uses. People who do bad things don't want to have a lot of people around. And so we activate them, we make them popular, and so those are some of the strategies that we use. Good uses tend to push out bad uses. Example, Bryant Park, in the heart of Times Square, was a drug-infested park back when I grew up in the 80s. They decided to lower the fence. They decided to activate it. In fact, they over-activated it. There's now a winter garden there with ice skating ring. But crime just disappeared. It now became a usable safe space, and now people go in there and enjoy it. We're now improving the perimeter of the park, so you may not want to go in at night if you're concerned, but now you have the perimeter you can enjoy that's well lit. We're improving the sidewalk because it's the outer park, so people can still get out and get healthy. But making sure our parks are safe is a top priority, and as I stated, we're seeing crime the lowest ever in New York City, but also in our parks.
Great. Okay, another a little more internal one, and for my benefit, if I can. So AARP this year celebrates our 60th anniversary. So we were founded 60 years ago. One of the things that we have been considering, and for the staff and volunteers in the room, still at the considering stage, is to commemorate and really memorialize that anniversary by investing in communities through community parks and through doing some investment in community parks around the country. What advice would you give us?
If you're considering it, my advice is do it.
Do it. Okay. And then if we do it, what would you tell us?
Wow. Parks are expensive. I try to figure out, you couldn't do something everywhere, but I think something very ceremonial that would have a high impact. I know there's adult fitness equipment. I saw some of your challenge grants. I would continue doing what you're doing. If you want to do something very permanent, you'd have to work with those local parks, whatever city you pick, to find out what it is. It may be one of those trouble steps that people cannot navigate, and now you're improving access by introducing a ramp where now people can get into it. There are loads of things that you can do. It all depends on what your general principles are. If it's all generational, it's one thing. If it's an aging population, that's something else. So I think if we talk, we can think about some good options and pick some strategic showcase projects to highlight your 60th anniversary.
Great.
So glad AARP is older than me.
Yes. Yes, but still going strong.
Yes, you are.
Yes. All right, so here's another myth that I think we encounter, or at least I believe it's a myth, the challenge of homelessness and how you confront that sort of preconception in people's minds.
I mentioned in my remarks, and I hope this question would come up, we're going to have to learn how to coexist with homeless. We've been dealing with this now as long as I've been a professional, and we're doing a good job at housing those that need housing, but it's the chronically ill, opioid epidemic. We're now dealing with the toughest population of homelessness. Public spaces for the public, and this is hard for people to hear. They're allowed to be in our public spaces. They can't go into parks and public spaces. The question is, where can they go? They're not going to disappear. We have to figure out how they coexist. In New York, we allow them to sit in parks. They can't have encampments. They can't be disruptive. They can't smoke and drink like anyone else. And we're trying to remove that word loiter, because if I'm sitting there with my wife, I'm a park user. If I'm homeless, I'm a loiterer. Same person sitting on a bench. So we're gonna have to work hard on changing how we approach it. But I was moved by this one incident. We opened up a waterfall. The Garden Club of New York had their 100th anniversary, and they paid for the restoration of a waterfall in Morningside Park. And as I was getting in my car to leave, a woman on the board handed me 33 cents. And I'm like saying, what is that? They says, there's a homeless gentleman over there that gave all the money he had because he wanted to thank you for restoring the waterfall, because this is where he comes to feel alive. I didn't know what to do with that, because in the shelter, you got to leave in the morning, and this was his escape, to come in the park and look at the waterfall, and he gave all the 33 cents that he had for that day. And it really put me in check, because I did not know how to process that, because there was a real story behind it. I never thought of that he's sitting on a bench because he had nowhere else to go, and he connected with this space. So it really stopped me in my tracks. This happened 2 years ago, and I still haven't been able to process what to do. Now, clearly he's not the same of some of the other homeless population, but it is something that we're trying to figure out. In the meantime, I'm trying to tell New Yorkers we've got to coexist, because they have no place else to go.
All right, well, we need to wind up. I'm going to give you like 30 seconds for any last comments and inspiration for all of us.
Well, for one, what I like about AARP Livable Communities in particular is that your focus on livability of cities is absolutely key. I love the challenge grants. I cannot tell you, if you want to have a quality city, if you want to have a livable city, it starts with parks and public space. I would not want to visit a city. I don't want to live in a city that doesn't have it, because that is what connects you as a population. We're focused on it because we want to make sure our population ages gracefully, but also they connect with other generations. So I want to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing. I know people don't often hear this, but I want to thank you for the work that you do. Without knowing it, I get hugs and kisses all the time because I open up parks. But there are people that are thanking you for the work that you do, truly. So all the love that I'm getting, that I've received by opening up the parks and pursuing public space, I'm now transferring to you, because I want to thank you for the outstanding work that you do. Keep doing what you're doing, because now I'm an AARP member, and I'll need all of you too.
Great. Well, let's give Commissioner Silver a round of applause. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.